Welcome to Making Waves.
Welcome to Making Waves.
Fresh ideas and freshwater science.
Fresh ideas and freshwater science, and why they matter to you.
Making Waves.
Making Waves is brought to you.
Making Waves is brought to you with support from the Society for Freshwater Science.
Hello, I'm Alina Ortega-Pic, and I will be your host for this episode of Making Waves. Today, I am thrilled to be joined by Doctora Valeria Souza Saldivar. Valeria is from Mexico City and is a researcher at the National Autonomous University, also known as UNAM, where she specializes in microbial ecology and evolutionary biology. Valeria has received many awards throughout her career, with a short list including the MacArthur and Aldo Leopold Fellowships. Also in 2019, she became an honorary member of the American Academy of Arts and Sciences, and in 2020, she received the SFS Environmental Stewardship Award. Valeria has worked over 20 years in a very special place called Cuatro Ciénegas, which is a unique wetland system in the Coahuila Desert in northern Mexico. As it is common these days, Cuatro Ciénegas is threatened by human activities, and this has really shaped Valeria's path as a scientist. So today we're going to learn more about her experience fighting for her beautiful study site. Welcome to Making Waves, Valeria. It's a real pleasure to have you with us.
I'm delighted to be with you, Aline.
Thank you. Could you please summarize Cuatro Ciénegas for us? Why is Cuatro Ciénegas so special and important, and why is it threatened?
Well, Cuatro Ciénegas is a lost world that stored life, probably since early diversification of life. We don't know how back it goes, but the more we search, the more we found deeper and deeper roots of the history of life on Earth in Cuatro Ciénegas. And let's remember that most of the history of life on Earth was microbial, and Cuatro Ciénegas is the site with more diversity in microbial life on Earth that we know. And that diversity is stored in the wetland because there's a mountain called San Marcos and Pinos that has a deep aquifer related to a magmatic pouch, probably a magmatic anomaly, because there 3 supercontinents open during the history of life on Earth, and 3 major events occur in Cuatro Ciénegas. And so, for some reason, Cuatro Ciénegas seems to be kind of in the center of those scenarios. And the microbial life of Cuatro Ciénegas is different from anywhere else. It's still marine, even if the Cuatro Ciénegas was isolated from the sea 35 million years ago. And its genetic resources are unique because these microbes have been eating very little phosphorus for a very, very, very long time. And they have also survived inside the mountain for long periods of time, and then they are propelled to the sunlight and to the posas by the magmatic fire. And so it goes up and down, and that makes the diversity enormous. Probably because each thing is isolated inside the mountain in different ways. And also is extremely diverse for snails and for fishes and for turtles and for many things. And when we arrived with NASA in 2000, it was to understand these microbial communities called stromatolites that are very abundant and diverse in Cuatro Ciénegas as a simile of early Earth. And we discovered it was not a simile, it was the real thing. It was not copying anything. And also as a model of potentially life on Mars. And I think right now, when Cuatro Ciénegas is losing its water in the surface, and the water is taking refuge inside the aquifer, the deep aquifer, it looks more Martian than anywhere else because there's no water in the surface anymore in many sites, which makes me cry. But the water and the microbes are inside the mountain. Probably it's the same in Mars.
So then the water extraction it's its main threat.
Exactly. Water in the desert is a treasure. And also it was for the first inhabitants of post-colonial Mexico. It was a problem because they could not grow vines or trees because everything was too wet. So they decided to make canals in order to dry Cuatro Ciénegas and make it a more productive land. And that got to the stream of making really big canals in the 70s. And that water, 90% of the water of Cuatro Ciénegas goes out from the valley every day through a canal called Saca Salada, which the name in Spanish means take the salty water out.
Mm-hmm.
And agriculture was the main economic activity for a long time. Now tourism is much more important.
Okay.
So the tourists want to see the water.
Yes.
While the alfalfa growers just spill the water as there's no tomorrow.
So I think your story is unfortunately fairly common these days, where the scientist ends up being the guardian of its study site and advocating for its conservation. I would imagine that when you first started working in Cuatro Ciénegas, you never imagined that your path would be the way it's been, and that you would one day be considered the voice of Cuatro Ciénegas, or as you say, the voice of the stromatolites. So I was wondering if there was a moment in time or something happened where that led to this transition from Valeria being a scientist to Valeria being a scientist and activist.
Well, it was October 2002 where we went. It was a big expedition. It was the first time that in Mexico we planned to isolate DNA from the environment in order to know the community composition through molecular markers. And it was the early times of molecular ecology. And so we had that task, but also we were traveling with a team of National Geographic and La Venta that they wanted to make a movie about Cuatro Ciénegas' deep mysteries in the water. And so it was this communication with the hydrologist of La Venta, the extracting the DNA, and at the same time, the ranchers came to me and say, hey, you are from the National University, and we need you to apply for us because Cuatro Ciénegas is going to die. They are opening 200 wells in the valley south of us, and the turtles in our ejido are dying because those wells are connected to us. Mm-hmm. And so in that instant, I became an activist because the people asked me to do so, but also because it took me 2 years, from 2000 to 2002, to understand the water and how the water was there, and to understand the tectonics and the mountains. And everything is broken under Cuatro Ciénegas because it was such an important geological site for moving of continents up and down. Mm-hmm. And so you can see the faults in the road. You don't need to be extremely clever to do that. It looks faulty everywhere. Mm-hmm. And so they were connected, and I have to prove to the Mexican government that. And right then I took samples from the pozos for the alfalfa in the two valleys, south and north of Cuatro Ciénegas and Cuatro Ciénegas, and we published that in PNS in 2006. And there was no doubt that the same community signature was in Cuatro Ciénegas and in the south and north, because there's a fault line that communicates everything.
So it was the same water.
It was the same water. And we could demonstrate it, and for the first time, Mexico government had to do something with the scientific data.
So water resources is complex, very complex, its management, and it involves multiple stakeholders. And through your career, you've engaged with a variety of stakeholders, ranging from government agencies to NGOs to big private companies and also the general public. Do you think any of these groups is particularly important to achieve that positive conservation actions persist over time, or do you think that all stakeholders are equally important?
For me, the most important stakeholders are the kids, because they are the future, and they are the ones who can link the future with the past. They can go with their grandfathers and parents and say, hey, you need to do things differently.
Mm-hmm.
And when your kids say, hey, turn off the light, you are spilling energy, or turn off the faucet, or you obey your kids most of the time. And so these kids in Cuatro Ciénegas are the agents of change, and they go from kindergarten to high school. And in kindergarten and elementary school is through art that we raise awareness on the environment. And it's very important that we take them to the water to see what is in stake. Mm-hmm. Most of the kids of Cuatro Ciénegas don't know the ecosystem because they live in a little town and they don't see the water. The water is several kilometers away. Okay. So we have to take them to understand what is in stake, what is in danger. Mm-hmm. And in high school they have a molecular lab, and they are discovering the genetic resources of Cuatro Ciénegas, but they are also describing new species and getting involved with the scientists. They are a central part of the scientific team.
So one of these young children that you started working with has a PhD and is leading the laboratory, right? So could you tell us more about that?
I took Héctor Arocha when he was 16 to the Pozas and explained that the origin of life, we didn't know about it, but the origin of diversity was there. Mm-hmm. And the ones that transformed an orange planet into a blue planet were there. Mm-hmm. And it was his heritage and his responsibility to take care of them. And he took it very seriously, and he studied biotechnology, and now he is the leader of the program Genesis to make the kids of Cuatro Ciénegas the owners of the genetic resources that are amazingly diverse in Cuatro Ciénegas, and the example for Mexico of the Nagoya Treaty. And yes, you change one kid and you may change the complete society. You never know which kid, so you may educate all of them.
Yes. Yeah, I think it's remarkable and beautiful how this labor with young children and teenagers has led to positive changes. And you've briefly mentioned that some of them talk to their parents. Do you have any more examples of the youth educating the adults? And have you seen noticeable changes resulting from a child or a teenager talking to an elder person?
Well, yes, there's now an awareness. Before, there was a kind of magic thinking that the water was there and it was never-ending water. Mm-hmm. And for me, it's a mystery how they see they're in the desert, it doesn't rain, and they think water is infinite. So it's magical thinking, basically, no? Mm-hmm. And through the kids, they changed that. They became aware that there was a problem. Mm-hmm. And many of the ranchers are now using dripping instead of flooding of the fields. They are changing cultivars from alfalfa to prickly pear or different cultivars. And that's what we want. We want that the high school becomes kind of the lighthouse that shows where to go. And they have experimental fields, and we are looking for money for make them the science that leads the community to a more sustainable future. Checking the soil chemistry, checking the health of the water around the town where there's a big problem with unsafe water. While on the side of where the pozas are, there's no nutrients. By the town, there's bad management of sewer water. Yes. And so the kids have to say, hey, this water is safe, this is not, how we treat it. So they have the knowledge, they will have the tools. And now the adults are listening. Actually, they are pretty impressed with their kids.
That's so great. Yeah, and it makes more sense that a local person would listen to a local child rather than someone that comes from outside. And then I think that's both beautiful and also makes things so challenging, because you need to get engaged with the children, and that takes time and effort, and you need to build this relationship. So there's no bottom down approach. It needs to come from within.
Yes, but I think it's the only change that truly matters, because you can have, I don't know how many workshops with the adults, and you can stamp as many stickers as you want and make charge flows, things, and they are not living it truly, really thinking. They will say yes and will be in your workshop, eat the cookies and go. But if you truly change the kids, the kids transform everything in their path, and it's their future. So it's in the interest of everyone to have a future.
So Valeria, you've had to deal and engage with stakeholders that don't have willingness to change, or have very little willingness to change their management of resources and their views about the problem. In your experience, what's the best way of dealing with stakeholders that just don't want to come on board?
Well, my worst stakeholder is CONAGUA, the National Commission of Water, the ones that are in charge of all the water laws that are incredibly complex, I think on purpose, so they can really steal a lot. Water is power. And CONAGUA doesn't have who is user of what, how many liters, when, who is legal and who is illegal. They don't want to acknowledge that list of users. And that's a problem at the national and the world level.
Yeah.
If there's no water, there's no life. So the most important resource in the whole planet is not titanium or lithium or whatever, is water. Water defines life. And we are running out of clean water.
So then do you engage with that level, or do you accept that there's no change there and then try to deal with the where there can be positive change?
I have dealt with them several times, but not, and things have happened. There's 3 decrees of Vedas del Agua in Cuatro Ciénegas given that engagement, but that doesn't mean that anybody's counting. And they are scared of me, which is good. But that doesn't mean that there's truly action. But the local action is what makes differences. And that's what we are counting on.
Okay, Valeria. Well, lastly, I would like to close by asking you, throughout your career, you've also you've engaged with children, with people studying their PhDs, their masters. You've been a mentor for a wide range of young people. And I wanted to ask you if you have any recommendations for young Spanish-speaking people who are looking to pursue a career in ecology and freshwater conservation, and if you have any ideas on how young scientists can help strengthen the relationship between society and science.
I think ecology is the science of the future, because there's no future without ecology, and global warming and all these changes are upon us. And we need to restore the habitats. We need to restore the land. We need to restore the soil, restore the balance of nutrients. And that enormous task is for all the young people that are now thinking on what to do about their future. Well, there's a path, and there's saving Earth. But not saving Earth, is saving us. Earth will survive everything. But human race, not so much if we don't do something together. And so please don't be afraid. Please just engage yourself with all the passion in your heart and transform locally the future and then globally.
Perfect, Valeria. Thank you so much for being with us today. This is such a wonderful opportunity, and good luck with everything in Cuatro Ciénegas.
Well, we have a river reborn in October 2020. And so if a river was reborn after 100 years of being dry, everything is possible. Here the kids did it.
That's so amazing. Thank you so much, Valeria. Yes, thank you so much for being with us.
You've been listening to the Making Waves podcast.
For more info,
please
visit us online
at the Society for Freshwater Science webpage.
Tune in next
time
for another fresh idea in freshwater science.